media and online. And then after we talk about those sort of updates, I'll get into a little bit about dealing with debt. So we'll talk about things like credit reports, collections, and bankruptcy. Just as a side note, I am a bankruptcy attorney, so that's sort of my specialty. So dealing with debt is the part that I'll be really strong at. But I should also be able to help you out with any questions that you might have related to the COVID-19 situation and relief that's available. So first, just to sort of talk about what we're able to do at Legal Aid. So we have several different sort of specialties where we have different attorneys and other staff members and sometimes social workers that can help with different situations that people might find themselves in. So there's the consumer portion that deals with debt, student loans, bankruptcy, car sales, those kinds of things. Education. So our education team focuses primarily on education of children, so kids that are in elementary, middle, and high school, you know, dealing with attendance barriers, discipline, and child disability issues within a school system. We also have a family law team that focuses primarily on helping individuals who have been victims of domestic violence, helping them deal with custody, divorce, and separation from their abusers. We have a housing team that helps with evictions, rental conditions, foreclosure issues, and we have a tenant advocacy project that has a table every day at eviction court in Franklin County, so that as many people as possible can get helped with their evictions so that they can maintain stable housing. We also do work for helping with public benefits issues. So if you're having trouble getting access to SNAP, Medicaid, medical coverage, disability, PRC, unemployment, all of that kind of thing, our public benefits team can help with that. We also have a newly minted reentry team. We've been doing reentry work for a while, but we now officially have a team working on that, helping folks get CQEs, getting their records sealed, getting expungements, hopefully to knock down some of the barriers to getting work. And then we also help seniors with things like wills, powers of attorney, advanced directives, things that you might need to have when you're a little older or about to pass away. And then we have a tax team who helps people with issues related to federal tax debts, federal tax returns, and things like that. Right now, they're also helping to focus on making sure people got their stimulus money last year and continue to get any future stimulus money that might be coming. And then finally, we also have folks at Legal Aid Society of Columbus who help with veteran situations. So corrections to DD 214s, overpayments, repayments of certain veterans benefits, and things of that nature. And so if you have an issue on that list and you want to contact LASC to get help with that, just remember we are a nonprofit law firm. We provide free legal services to folks who meet our income and eligibility criteria. And so if you're interested or have an issue that you think we might be able to help you with, you can always contact us and apply for services. You can do that online, which is probably at this point one of the quicker ways to get your application in. But we also have intake workers who are available by phone from 9:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. every day, Monday through Friday, to take phone call intakes. And then we also have COVID-19 specific information on our website as well. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the American Rescue Plan. So this is the document or the piece of legislation that created the new stimulus checks that are coming, or I think started to come even last weekend. They're $1,400 per person. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. This plan also provides a lot of renting or housing, rental, and utility assistance. It makes some changes to the tax code for some increased tax credits, which is really good. And it extends some unemployment compensation and, of course, the stimulus money. So, I have the wrong one open, guys. Let me fix this because trust me, you're going to like the other one better. So let me stop that. It's all the same information, but I made it prettier. All righty. And again, I apologize.
Oh, okay. No worries. My apologies.
I got you. Were there some questions? I saw that there's some things in the chat there. And I have trouble seeing that when I'm presenting. So are there any questions that I could answer while I'm getting this back to where it needs to be?
I have a question. One of the things that I am going to say thank you to legal aid. Oh, can you hear me?
I can keep going. I'll answer your question, Deborah.
It's been helping me deal with medical bills for my husband and I 10 years after he died still. And they're helping me with the unemployment. But one of the things I noticed when I tried to file for HEAP and stuff, if you're honest or have any kind of resources, you can't really get any government help. I'm getting legal aid help because I'm 65, but this is what I've noticed in the system. I can't get SNAP. If you have a little bit over, then, and I'm getting unemployment, but yeah, is that something you find, like people who I've been getting unemployment, but not since March, but there was several months I couldn't get it because I'm a sub teacher, and I'm currently dealing with issues with that. But so I guess, is it true that if with these new things, have they changed the guidelines so I could get some? I mean, I'm wearing all these clothes because I can afford at the most to have my house at 62 degrees. It was 60, and I thought this is crazy. And at night it was in the 50s. So
sure.
Danged if you do, danged if you want. And so this is what I'm running across. I can't really get any assistance if you have some resources. Yeah. I don't own my house.
So unfortunately, we as a society, we have certain safety nets sort of in place for the poorest of the poor. Okay. And as you sort of climb your way out of that, there's like nothing. There's this just complete void for people who still really need safety nets, or at least some kind of graduation into not being impoverished anymore. And it's just not something that exists, unfortunately. Things like SNAP benefits, I think, are based on your income and whether you have, I think it's 130% of the federal poverty line. HEAP, I believe, is like 150% of the federal poverty line. But 100 just being right at the poverty line is still very, very poor. So even at Legal Aid, we help folks up to 200% of the federal poverty line. Because the folks who are sort of on that edge, they still really need help, or a little bit of help, something. And unfortunately, a lot of our programs just aren't set up to help folks when they start doing better, when they start getting themselves to a point where they're not as impoverished anymore. And it's really kind of unfortunate. I am unaware of anything in the American Rescue Plan that changes any of that eligibility for those kinds of things. But when I get a little further in and I talk about some of the tax credits, I think that there are some credits that are available or that may be available for more people than what they normally are.
Thank you.
So, yeah. No problem. All right, guys. See, I told you this one's prettier, right? So things that the American Rescue Plan has in it, having to deal with sort of housing, rental, and utility assistance. So it's important to note that the American Rescue Plan does not extend the federal eviction moratorium. That's going to expire on March 31st of this year. And so far, I've heard nothing about it being extended or anything sort of being put in its place to prevent hundreds, thousands, tons of people from being put on the streets here at the end of the month. And so hopefully with that coming, the next part of the American Rescue Plan with the rental assistance will hopefully help folks not end up getting put on the street. So the American Rescue Plan provides an additional $27.4 billion to help with rental assistance. and that rental assistance can now include amounts that you're behind. It can include future rent. It can include utility payments and other housing expenses. And that assistance can be provided for 18 months. So that's really a lot of assistance that wasn't available before and for a much longer period of time. They also included in that plan $5 billion in emergency housing vouchers so that people who are at risk of experiencing homelessness, people who are fleeing or trying to flee domestic violence, dating violence, stalking, or human trafficking, and people who are recently homeless but could get housing stability with rental assistance can get housing. So that's a little bit different than what we've had prior before as well. And then also included in the plan is an additional $5 billion of utility payment assistance. And a bunch of that is going toward the low income home energy assistance program. And then something that we haven't seen included before is homeowner assistance. A lot of people focus on rental assistance because those tend to be the folks who are getting evicted quickly. But because of COVID-19, there are a lot of people who are behind on their mortgages and who are at risk of getting their homes foreclosed. So there is homeowner assistance as well that can help with mortgage payments, utility bills, and other housing costs. And then finally, there's also $5 billion in the plan for homelessness assistance, including funds for conversions of properties like motels and things into shelters. So hopefully all of that will help folks as our eviction moratorium ends and more people end up being removed from their homes. Okay. There was some expansion of unemployment compensation. So it extends the federal employment aid programs through September 6th of this year. And so that means they're also providing an additional 29 weeks to those who are already receiving pandemic and emergency unemployment compensation or the pandemic unemployment assistance program. So that's adding time for folks to hopefully be able to get back to work when it is safer to go back to jobs where there are a lot of people involved. There will continue to be the additional payments. They're still $300 per week as they were under the plan that was passed back in December. And they did try to help some with sort of the federal tax debacle, because originally all of those unemployment compensation benefits, including the extra $600 per week that we were getting at the beginning of the pandemic, was going to be entirely taxable, which is very difficult for folks because a lot of people didn't have taxes withheld from their unemployment because it was thought that Congress was going to fix that and it wasn't going to be an issue. So they did fix it a little. So federal taxes will be waived, on the first $10,200 of unemployment benefits in the 2020 tax year. So if you were receiving unemployment benefits and you've already filed your tax return, you may need to file an amended return so that you can get that that credit in there so that you don't have as high a tax liability, or maybe you can get a refund. It's important though that waiver of the taxes on the first $10,000 of unemployment only applies to folks who are making under $150,000 or less for the household. Okay. Stimulus information. So this is the part that I think everybody's most excited about because it is actual cash in your pocket that you can use for whatever you want, whatever you need. And so right now, we're looking at $1,400 for individuals, and then for another $1,400 for your dependents. So if you're a family of 3, it's you and you've got 2 children, you're looking at getting $4,200. And I think those payments started either over last weekend or earlier this week. So, keep an eye out for that. It is kind of coming in waves, so not everybody gets it at the same time. And in addition to that, you want to make sure that you've had a tax return filed recently, because that's what they're going to use. They'll use either 2019 or 2020. So if you filed 2019, you're good to go. don't have to be too concerned about getting your 2020 return filed just yet. But if you didn't file in 2019 and you didn't file the no income return that allowed you to get the stimulus last year, then you'll really want to consider filing the 2020 return as soon as you can, so you can get that $1,400 right away. And the other important difference between this stimulus and the prior two stimuluses that we received is that they didn't include the language that protected the money from creditors taking it from you. So in a situation where you have a judgment against you, then the creditor might be able to take that stimulus out of your bank account. Now, the important thing to remember is regular creditors can't go get this money from the IRS. They can't say, hey, so-and-so owes me something, so I get their stimulus money. They can't do that. They can't just take money out of your bank account if they haven't already gotten a judgment against you. So even if you have multiple debts, you don't have to be concerned about creditors taking the money unless there are judgments. And then there's really just one very specific way that these creditors can get this money from you, and that's by filing for a bank attachment, also called a non-wage garnishment. And so they have to know where you bank, and they have to time it perfectly, because a bank attachment is a one-shot deal. They file it. If there's money in it on the day that the bank processes it, then the bank can forward that money to the court that'll forward it to the creditor. If they file it and on the day the bank processes it, you don't have money in there, or you don't have money that isn't protected from collection, then they get nothing. So it's probably pretty rare that a creditor would be able to attach your bank account just perfectly and get that money from you. But make sure if you do have judgments, just when you get that money into your account, pull it back out or transfer it to somewhere else that a bank attachment can't get to. That way you keep that money in your pocket and you can use it. I mentioned a second ago about money in your bank account that's protected. So everybody gets to protect $500, the first $500 in your bank account. If you have income from sources like Social Security, child support, unemployment, those are all protected as well. So whatever can be attributed or can be traced to those kinds of funds are 100% protected. So you're not super exposed if you've got a judgment, but definitely something to keep an eye out for so that you can hang on to that stimulus money. All right. The other really cool thing in this plan is the tax credits that come with it. And so they expanded the child tax credit for 2021. So for this year, they've increased that to from $2,000 per child to $3,600 for children under 6, and then $3,000 for children ages 6 to 17. And this credit phases out for folks who are making more than $75,000 or $150,000 joint. But this credit's going to be fully refundable. So if you get to claim this credit, then what that means is if your tax liability is less than the credit, that they will actually pay it out to you. And that doesn't happen with every tax credit. And so that's important. That's how folks end up getting really large tax refunds, are these fully refundable tax credits. The other cool thing about that child tax credit is that under the second bullet point there is that they're going to start paying that out to you. Half of it will be paid to you in monthly installments from July 2021 through December 2021. And so if you have a kid that is under the age of 6, you'll get $300 per child per month during those months. And if you have children ages between 6 and 17, you'll get $250 per month during those months. And again, that all depends on whether you're able to claim that child tax credit. So your income does have to be below the $150,000 for the household. And then the other piece is they've expanded the earned income tax credit. So that's that is a tax credit that's always been fully refundable. And they've really increased it. So folks who are already getting the earned income tax credit for 2021, you'll see an increase in that. And then it also extends eligibility to more people, besides folks that don't have children and things like that. Or besides folks that do have children. So more people who don't have children will be eligible for the earned income tax credit as well.
I have a question.
Yes.
I didn't get here for the beginning. Do you want us to wait till the end? I'm sorry, I wasn't sure.
No. You absolutely can interrupt me anytime.
Okay, I apologize.
Absolutely.
So does Legal Aid Society anticipate Ohio doing anything like, if you do receive benefits, coming back on this $300 per month on this extra child tax credit and saying, okay, well, now this is going to affect any other benefits that you receive, just like they did with the increase of unemployment?
So I would have to get back to you on an answer for that, Jasmine, because I would need to double check. So I know, for instance, the stimulus money doesn't count as income. And that's specific in the American Rescue Plan and with the other stimuluses. It's always been that doesn't count as income for anything where you have to report all of your income to determine your benefits. And so that is one thing that I did not look at when we were preparing this, is whether that tax credit, that $250 or $300 will count as income. I feel like it probably doesn't, because you don't report things like your earned income credit tax refund as income to you for benefits purposes. So my guess is that it is not going to count as income, but I can confirm that and I can let Bridget know, because I think that's an excellent question and one that I hadn't thought about.
Thank
Sandra,
you.
I have a
was
question.
curious.
I'm sorry.
There
Yeah.
was another question in the chat. Oh,
Yeah.
Is that Jill speaking?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, Jill. Thank you.
Okay. Sure. Thank you. Sandra, I had a question as to whether there are any requirements to receiving the $1,400 stimulus besides having filed an income tax return in 2019 or 2020.
So no, it does phase out for folks, I believe, who are making more than $150,000 joint. So if and $75,000 single. So there are folks who will either get less or no stimulus if they're making above that threshold. But other than that, you want to make sure that you've had a tax return filed, and then you should automatically get it. And the other thing is, if you already received the last two stimuluses, you're almost certainly guaranteed to get this next stimulus, the $1,400.
Okay, you said almost certainly guaranteed.
So that's because I'm a lawyer and I hedge.
Oh.
I almost never speak in terms of definites. That's my fault. But I'm pretty sure, see, I'm doing it again. I am pretty sure that there wouldn't be anything that would hold that money up. As far as I know, it is not collectible by the federal agencies. So if you owed back taxes or student loan, well, they're not collecting for student loans anyway, but if you owed back taxes, or if you owed like a benefit overpayment to the federal government, they're not going to take your stimulus money. The only creditors that could have at it are those private creditors I mentioned before. And so everyone should be expecting to receive their stimulus.
Okay, and you said it was coming in waves. Is there a priority level as to which wave people are in?
I don't think that there's priority necessarily. I think it's, it's not transparent as far as who gets it and when.
Okay.
There is the tool you can, I think it's, I want to say it's like, where's my money, but that can't be right. There is a tool through the IRS that you can check and see if yours has been scheduled and when you can expect to receive it. They will ask for information like I think it's your address, your name and address, and one other piece of information that's usually pretty readily available.
There's irs.gov, and you can access that information from their website.
Yep.
I had a quick question. I'm getting unemployment. The $300 and $600 earlier. Do we have to file for that monies?
Do you mean file taxes?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So because they are, yeah, yep.
Okay,
and so because they were because that unemployment is counted as income, there
Oh.
you will have a tax requirement. So definitely file taxes this year.
Okay.
Maybe don't do it right away if you don't have to, because they're still sort of coming up with the regulations and everything for that $10,200 waiver of federal taxes. But I think the last I heard, they did extend the tax filing deadline out to May 15th. So there's even some additional time. But yeah, if you have unemployment income, you're going to need to file a tax return.
All
All right.
One more
So
question.
Yeah.
There's
I'm
like a
so-
million questions.
I'm so sorry.
So for parents that have like split custody where like I alternate years that are claimed. So 2018, his dad claimed him, 2019, I claimed him, 2020, and it goes back and forth.
Mhm.
Is there a way for both parents to get like the full stimulus for the child, or is it like split between them? Like, do you know anything about that?
So that's an excellent question too. And I'm going to get a piece of paper because I will forget all of these if I don't write it down. But that's an excellent question too that I don't have an answer for you. So I imagine that the money that starts getting paid out in July is going to be based on who claimed them as a dependent in 2020, which could be problematic in the situation that you were talking about. And also seems like there should be a way that both parents can get that. But I will ask that question to our tax team and get back with you, or I'll send an email to Bridget with these answers so that she can distribute them to you guys. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Yep.
you.
And then Jasmine, I think you had a question.
Yeah, if somebody, like my dad's been off work for the last 2 years because he broke his back, he hasn't been able to work. And he hasn't filed taxes because he hasn't had any income, and he hasn't gotten any stimulus or anything because he was like, I guess, I'm SOL because I'm not working. I can't get unemployment because I did get laid off, should he still try to file anything to get
Yes.
this back stimulus, and what would he file in order to get that at this point?
So I think my next slide, look at that. My next slide is about tax returns. I'm going to answer your question in just a second,
Okay.
Jasmine, because it's coming up. But yeah, so if you should consider filing your 2020 tax return as soon as possible if you were claimed as a dependent on somebody else's return in 2019, because the stimulus, the $1,400 stimulus checks that are coming now, dependents get them. So they're 18 and over. It doesn't matter whether you were claimed as a dependent in 2019. You can now get the $1,400 stimulus, but they need to know that by you filing a 2020 tax form. And then also you want to try and file as soon as possible if you have dependents that were claimed by somebody else in 2019, so that you make sure that you get the $1,400 stimulus and that the child tax credit applies to you. If you had dependents that were born in 2020, because they don't know that you have these dependents, and you will be eligible for both the stimulus for them and the child tax credit that we talked about. Or for anybody that you have that is anybody who is now a dependent. So they weren't your dependent in 2019, but they are now a dependent of yours. You also want to file the 2020 tax return as soon as possible if you have moved or changed bank accounts since the last time we were receiving stimulus money, so that it gets to the right place. Otherwise, it's going to delay you getting the money. And then to get to Jasmine's point, if you don't normally file tax returns, or if you're in a situation where you weren't working 2019, 2020, that's okay. You're still eligible for the stimulus. And the way to get that is to file a 2020 return. And so the IRS has a recovery rebate tool that's built into the free filing tool at irs.gov. And so you'll file a tax return that shows $1 of income, and it'll have the credits for last year. So the 600 plus the 1,200. So it'll be 1,800 tax refund that they get. And then that will also make sure that they get their $1,400 stimulus that's coming up. And I think part of the reason why they're sort of shifting that money out in waves is to make sure that the most people get that $1,400 as possible. Another reason to file, even if you don't normally need to file, is that you might qualify for the childless earned income credit. It's not as much as the regular earned income credit tax credit is. Said that weird, but it does help get a little bit of money into your pocket, and so it might make sense to file for that reason. And then, so that's all that I have on the American Rescue Plan. Does anybody else have any questions on this stuff before we move on?
I have a question. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
I got this little tiny phone. I don't have a computer yet. I gotta somehow get a computer. This childless earned income credit. I'm a widow. I was never blessed with being a mother. So does that mean I get some? I get some benefit?
So potentially, so the earned income credit, and I don't know the specifics on how it was changed under the act, but the earned income credit is for folks who make under a certain level of income. And
Okay.
so typically the people who receive the most earned income credit also have children, but there is earned income credit available for folks who don't have children. And I don't think that very many people know that. And
Wow.
you have to file, you have to file tax return to get it. And it's one of those credits that's fully refundable. So you get paid that. If you have no other tax liability, you get paid the full amount of that credit. So yeah, you definitely want to talk to a tax professional to help you figure out if you're eligible for that. And you can get free tax help by contacting, I think it's, I used to know this so much better when I gave these presentations all the time. I think it's 211.
I think it's AARP.
Yeah, so AARP.
311.
Yeah, it's AARP for folks who are retirement age. But for anyone, I think if you call 211 from any 614 area code phone, you can get information on where your free tax filing places are. And so there's several. I think that a lot of them might be working a little differently than they have in the past because of the pandemic. But definitely there's still free filing places available.
Sandra, would that credit apply to both male and females?
Which credit? The child tax credit?
Yes, the childless.
The
earned
childless?
income credit.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay, thank
absolutely.
you.
It should apply to anybody. And again, I'm pretty sure that it's based on level of income. But yeah, it's just a lot of people think earned income credit can only be something for folks who have kids. They just tend to get more because they have kids, but there is some childless tax credit that's available. And then I saw someone else.
Yeah, Jerry.
Hi, Jerry.
On the AARP, it doesn't matter. You don't have to be a senior. They do taxes for anybody.
Do they?
Yes, because I do.
Awesome.
I do. I used to do them too. Do the taxes for them.
Awesome. So great. Thanks for the information, Jerry. I appreciate that. All right. Any other questions before we move on to the next sort of set of topics here? All right. So the next thing we're going to start talking about is more related to sort of dealing with debt and what do you do? How do you figure out what you've got? All of that kind of good stuff. So usually the first place to start if you're unsure about what kind of debts you have, or really it's not a bad idea just to check your credit report, even if you think you know about all of your debts, because your creditors are looking at it. So should you, to make sure that it's up to date, that it's accurate, and that it has all the right information on it. And so you can obtain your credit report by going to annualcreditreport.com. It's absolutely free there. There won't be any, side things that you have to sign up for and then cancel or anything like that. This is the website that was set up by the government that to allow you to get access to your free credit reports. When it's not COVID times, you usually can only get your reports from all three credit bureaus once a year. But right now, because of COVID-19, you can actually get a free credit report from all three of these once a week. And they just extended that through April of next year. So if you're interested in checking out your credit report, it's never been easier to get free copies of it so that you can check and make sure that it's accurate. That's really the number one problem, is that because of the way credit reports are put together, it's your creditors who are giving the bureaus this information, and they don't always do a good job of updating it or keeping it accurate. And so it's always a good idea to check your report, and just for accuracy purposes. But also, if you're just not sure what's out there, because old debts get sold to debt collectors and things like that, it can be difficult to know who you owe money to or who's bought your debt from whom and all of that stuff. So credit reports can be really helpful for that. It is important to know, though, that not all of the information or not all of the debts that you owe are going to appear on credit reports. Like I just said a couple of seconds ago, it's up to your creditors to report that information. There are some creditors that just don't. They don't want to be subject to the rules of the Fair Credit Reporting Act and things like that. So they don't report. And the most common ones are things like payday loans, some of the buy here, pay here type places where you purchase cars, and all kinds of other varieties of things. And medical debt generally doesn't show up on credit reports either until it's in collections. And even then it might not show up there. So it's just important to know sort of what information is going to get put on that report and what might be missing. So you want to make sure that you check all of your personal information, make sure they've got your name and address, social security number, prior employments, all of that correct. Check your account information, make sure you recognize who that account is. And if you don't, there's a number on the report you should be able to call and find out more information. Check those balances and whether the debt is open or closed. And then you can always dispute incorrect information, and you should do that so that you can get your credit report to be accurate. Since that is something that a lot of lenders, banks, or credit card companies are looking at, you want to make sure that it's as accurate as possible so that it shows them the information that they're looking for and not something that you're not expecting. All right. And then I sent Bridget this PowerPoint, as well as some handouts that we made to go along with this. So hopefully she'll distribute that to you guys as well. And there'll be a little bit more detailed information on sort of how to dispute your credit report and where to go for that.
Everyone should have received all of the documents
Awesome.
prior to the workshop. If you haven't, if you just want to let me know in the chat, I am more than happy to send them over.
Awesome. Thank you, Bridget. All right. So if you do have debts and you're getting calls from creditors and you're afraid about what they can do to you as far as when they're collecting, there are laws that they have to abide by and things that they absolutely cannot do. So debt collectors, creditors, they cannot have you jailed for non-payment. I'd like to see them try to do that. We don't have debtors prisons in the United States, or at least we purport not to have them, but that's a whole other story. You definitely can't be jailed for not paying your credit card bill or your light bill or anything like that, medical bills, stuff like that. They are not allowed to use false names or statements about who they are or who they're collecting on behalf of. If you get a phone call from a creditor and you say, "Who is this?" they have to tell you who they are. They have to tell you what debt they're trying to collect. They're not allowed to threaten you or your family with harm or use obscene words. So sort of something to look out for if you are talking to somebody who says that they're a debt collector and they start doing some of these things, it's very possible that they're a scam and not really a debt collector. So especially watch out for things where they're threatening loss to put you in jail, or there's a common one that happens a lot where they say that they're collecting for like an old payday loan. And it sounds familiar because a lot of people have payday loans or have had them in the past. So it starts to sound familiar and they start saying things like, and we're going to press criminal charges if you don't pay this. And that should be a red flag to you. There's no criminal charges for not paying on a payday loan. And so don't set up a payment plan with those folks. And if you're ever unsure, one thing that I do a lot is once you find out the name and if you have the phone number for them, Google that information. And see if you can find a website for them, or see if there's other complaints or other information on the internet telling you that maybe that's not a legitimate collector. Debt collectors also are not allowed to contact you before 8 a.m. or after 9 p.m. They have to, they can't contact you without identifying themselves. They can't tell others about your debt or publish the names of debts that you owe. They're not allowed to falsely represent to you that you've committed a crime, and they're not allowed to misrepresent the amount that you owe on your debt. And so people calling you and doing some of these things might be a red flag that it's a scam, or they might be violating something we call the Fair Debt Collections Practices Act. And so if you're getting those kinds of phone calls and things like that, it's important to sort of keep track of them, so that if you did end up finding out that it was a legitimate debt collector, that you might be able to sue them for violating the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act and get some money in your pocket for that violation. So I mentioned before when we were talking about protections for like income and money in your bank accounts, and in the case of a bank attachment, that there's things that are protected from collection. And that's true of a lot of things, not just income. And so when a debt collector has sued you and has a judgment, they have limits on the things that they can take from you to try and pay the debt. And so I mentioned the $500 for cash and money in bank accounts and stuff like that. They're limited in the amount of jewelry they can try and take, the car, clothing and household items. If you're entitled to some kind of settlement because of a personal injury from an auto accident or something similar to that, tools of trade, so things that you use for your work or to make money from, all of those have protections. And so creditors can't take those things from you, or at least have to leave you with something instead of taking everything. And these same exemptions apply. We'll talk in a minute about bankruptcy. These same exemptions apply in bankruptcy to help protect your things from being taken from you in bankruptcy as well. And then income, I mentioned this a little bit before as well, but things like Social Security or other retirement, child support, unemployment, there are some other benefits. There's a lot of different types of income that are completely protected from collection. And so no creditors can take that income. There is some exception for things like Social Security and other federal benefits. If you do owe some other federal debts, then there's the possibility for offset for those. But as long as you don't owe any federal debts, then all of that income is protected from collection by anybody.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I've had a creditor call me and offer this is how much you owe, or we'll take this settlement.
Mhm.
And my thing is, I don't know how, I don't mind doing the settlement, but we're also still in the middle of a pandemic. So if you're telling me, I call them and just I didn't call them, but I was talking to somebody. I'm like, I don't want to call them and then start it and then acknowledge and start the whole mess. But then how do they go about starting a payment plan in the middle of a pandemic when they know everybody's financially strapped? If I wait, do I run the risk of them taking me to court? I just don't know how that works.
Yeah. So, and it really depends on the creditor. And so if they're offering you, in my experience, if they're offering you a settlement right now, they might offer you a settlement later. And so you might be able to wait until things are a little bit more stable. But if you don't settle debts, there's always the possibility that the creditor could sue you. And, depending on sort of what's happening at the moment, it may not be that impactful, especially if you're not currently working, because they get a judgment and they're not going to be able to do anything with it. Because if you're only getting unemployment benefits, or if you don't have any income at all, they really just have sort of a worthless piece of paper. And so, it really sort of depends on the situation that you're in at the time. But yeah, anytime you don't settle up a debt, they always have the option to sue you as long as the statute of limitations hasn't expired. And so statute of limitations on things like contracts, I think, is around 6 years. So they have a long time to try and collect from you. Not as long as they used to, because it used to be 15, but they do have a long time to try and collect from you, and they always have the option to file a lawsuit to try and collect their money. And so on that note, Jasmine, you are great at transitioning these things for me. I appreciate that. On that note, so if you do get a lawsuit, or if you are worried about these creditors that are calling you, or you have debts that you just haven't been able to pay, a good question to ask yourself is whether or not you're collectible at this point. Because a person who is uncollectible has exempt assets, so stuff that they own is protected and their income is protected, and they don't own real estate, then you can stop the creditors from calling you by sending them a letter telling them that you are uncollectible and telling them that you no longer want them to contact you. This is actually something that we help folks with at Legal Aid. We call it our bankruptcy bypass program. It's for folks who are long-term uncollectible, where we can send letters to creditors and stop that harassment. It doesn't prevent lawsuits or judgments or anything like that, but if you're long-term uncollectible, judgments aren't going to end up mattering too much because they can't collect with them. Let's see. Then if you're in a situation where you just have a lot of debt, and especially after this last year where a lot of people lost jobs and were unable to pay debt or had to incur additional debt because they didn't have the money for basic living expenses, then bankruptcy might be a good option for you. Especially if when you get back to work, you might be facing wage garnishment because there is a judgment. Or if you're facing utility shutoff, or if your driver's license is suspended because you didn't have insurance and were involved in an accident. Those are all sort of emergency reasons why somebody might file bankruptcy, but you can file just because you have too much debt and that you'll never be able to dig yourself out of, even if you're not facing one of these sort of emergency situations. And so I want to talk a little bit about bankruptcy just because it is a good option, and especially now that the pandemic is hopefully coming to an end, or will be maybe in the next year, to start considering whether bankruptcy might be your best option for dealing with debt. And so bankruptcy can do a lot. It can get rid of a lot of debt for you, but there are certain things that it doesn't get rid of automatically. So student loans is one of the things that can be discharged if you show financial hardship in paying them back. That bar is so high that it is very difficult to get student loans discharged in bankruptcy. So I generally don't recommend bankruptcy for anyone whose main debt or only debt is student loan debt, because you may or may not actually be able to wipe that out. Domestic support obligations like child support or spousal support, those are never going to go away with filing a bankruptcy. Some tax debts, depending on how old they are and whether you filed your tax returns, those don't go away with bankruptcy. Liens on real estate, so if you own a home and you have a mortgage, you can't get rid of the debt on the house and keep the house. So you just want to make sure that you're aware of how that part works if you own real estate. And then if you obtained some kind of benefit or debt as a result of fraud, so if you were receiving unemployment, but you were actually working, that could be considered fraud. And that kind of debt, overpayment of benefits through unemployment for that reason, is probably not going to be dischargeable because it was fraudulent. And then, so bankruptcy has a couple of options. Most people, when they hear bankruptcy, think about Chapter 7. Chapter 7 is Chapter 7 is a liquidation bankruptcy, where you file bankruptcy, you're in it for about 3 to 5 months, and at the end, you get your discharge of all of your dischargeable debts. In exchange for sort of wiping your slate clean debt-wise, you do risk having your assets taken from you and sold to creditors so that they get paid something. But as I mentioned before, when I was talking about those protections, bankruptcy wouldn't be much of a fresh start if it required you to give away or give up absolutely everything that you own. So you do get to protect most of your assets, really. And so most people who filed Chapter 7 are not actually at risk of losing anything. And importantly, part of the act that was passed back in December that got us the $600 stimulus checks also altered the bankruptcy code, making that stimulus and any future stimulus under the same provision excluded from bankruptcy estate. So it's protected. You could have your $1,400 stimulus sitting in your bank account and file for bankruptcy and be able to hang on to it. So that's really, really important as well. So, you know, filing bankruptcy is not going to impact your stimulus at all. And then your other option, if Chapter 7 isn't good for you, or if Chapter 13 might be better, would be a debt repayment plan, and that's called Chapter 13. In a Chapter 13 case, you're in bankruptcy for up to 3 to 5 years, and you're paying back all or some of your debt over that time. And so Chapter 13 can be very, very helpful if you are behind on your mortgage. If you fell behind, but now you're able to make the regular mortgage payment, but you can't make up the amount that you're behind, Chapter 13 can put you in a bankruptcy where you spread out all of those back payments over up to 60 months, which is 5 years. And then when you finish, you're current. You don't have that same option in Chapter 7. Chapter 7 also has income limits. So if you make above the median income for your household size, then Chapter 7 won't be available for you. So you can do a Chapter 13 instead if you still need bankruptcy relief. If you filed a Chapter 7 bankruptcy in the last 8 years, you're eligible to file Chapter 13 if you need to. And then if you have an asset that you might lose in a Chapter 7, that would be another time to consider Chapter 13 bankruptcy. All right, so I threw a lot of
Sandra?
information at you guys. Yes, do I have questions?
Yes, I'm not sure if Lady Francesca is still on, but I believe she had a few questions. Lady Francesca, are you able to unmute?
I am here.
Hi,
Beautiful.
Francesca.
Hey, I don't know if you can see me, but I'm here.
I see you.
Yep, we can see you.
You see me, but I see you. Okay. Well, that's cool. Sorry, I'm not in my beauty makeup today, but I'm doing cleaning and stuff in my house. But here's my question, and maybe we can talk privately about this, but I'm already in subsidized housing.
Okay.
Because it is no secret, most of the women there, and there's another issue I want to talk to you about, domestic violence, because this comes up in presentations I talk about all the time. It is no secret I've spoken at dress for success about HIV positive women, and I'm sure you know about laws of HIV and disclosure and all of that. But if you're someone living with HIV and you're in a partner situation, it may be much more difficult for you to leave a domestic violence situation because of those issues. However, what I wanted to talk to you about today was, or to further follow up with you on a private conversation, is that I live in subsidized housing right now. And they're upping my rent, but I'm kind of living with a slumlord, and being also, it is no secret, I have no shame in saying I am a transgender woman and living with HIV. So I have those strikes going against me being a trans woman, because I don't have protection as for housing underneath the Fair Credit or the Fair Housing Act.
Fair Housing Act.
Discriminated against just for being a trans woman and being denied housing. It makes it much harder to find housing. But when they are upping my rent, and the landlord is not maintaining the property from the outside, like I have had comments said to me like this: I could paint paint the porch and do some sweat equity and find me a boyfriend if I lost the weight. Yes, my landlord has said this to me. Mind you, I went through weight loss surgery in 2018 and I've lost 198 pounds. And so,
Good
yes,
for you.
still being fat shamed. I'm still being fat shamed. So I'm being told if I garden, I've got a faucet in my kitchen that has not been repaired. But I do have some mental health issues going on there as well, just from being a victim of violence, all of that. But regardless of those facts, is that if you're going to expect me to pay double rent and I'm having to deal with rodent control and pest control out of my own pocket, and the landlord should be bringing the standards up. However, and this landlord has several properties here in Florida, New York, and Columbus, and he mainly rents to people who are living with HIV or deal with these service organizations because he knows, I mean, it's going to be guaranteed rent, and he's only going to bring in property he's going to bring in. And I don't mean offense to anyone on here if you're a person of color or that, but I mean, one thing I will say is he sent two people over to me, two men who I could tell had recently shot up in their arm with heroin. And I was like, you're not coming in my house. I'm a single woman, and one of you is going to the upstairs, one of you is going to the kitchen. No, I need to feel safe as a woman in my own home. I need to feel safe, and I need 24 hours notice. You can't just come knocking on my door, and I'm leaving for grocery shopping. Now, if it's some emergency repair, like my pipes burst or something, yes, I need to be around. But to come fix a faucet that's been broken for 7 months, I still need advance notice before you come in.
Mhm.
That's
Well, and
when
most leases require 24 hours notice. And I think that may even be something that's just kind of standard in landlord tenant. So I am not a housing expert. And so I'm fairly limited in my world to bankruptcy, but I do know that the Legal Aid Society of Columbus does work on conditions issues. And so if you're living, especially in situations where it's landlords who routinely have conditions issues. And so if that's the situation, if you're having conditions issues, then you may want to give Legal Aid Society of Columbus a call to see if that's something that they might be able to help you out with. As far as, upping the rent and things like that, to some extent, landlords can do their own thing. They have kind of their prerogative, and don't get me started on landlords because I have lots of words I could say about them. But it is very important for you to feel safe. Everybody deserves safe and functioning living space. And so those are real concerns. And you may be able to try and escrow your rent. There is a specific way to do that. And things like that to try and get him to fix those conditions issues. But yeah, it's a very difficult situation. But I would recommend, I think even at Columbus Legal Aid's website, if you're interested in looking at doing a rent escrow, I believe we have a packet there with all the information on how to do that. Definitely don't just withhold rent. There's a firm process, follow the process. If you don't follow the process, it's not going to work.
you can still do that process even if you're in subsidized housing.
Absolutely.
Okay, because I know Mr. Mackey from Columbus
You know
Legal.
James? Yeah, James is great.
He did my bankruptcy for me last year.
Oh, okay,
He
I work with
is
him.
amazing. I love James.
Mm-hmm.
Can I say that?
You can say
Can
that.
I
And
really say
I'm
really?
going to
love him because he really went the extra mile
did.
for me. With it,
And I will tell him that you
without
said
it
that too.
sounding bad. I don't want it sounding bad.
It won't sound bad. He will really appreciate that. So James actually also does housing work, and really enjoys the bankruptcy work that he gets to do because it's a little more positive than the housing work that he gets to do. And so honestly, you could reach out to him with that question probably, since you already had a bit of an attorney-client relationship. He may not be able to answer you, or he might just direct you to the website. But I did drop the website into the chat so that you all have access to that. But yeah, that the situation is tough. And so hopefully you can get some guidance on that from somebody who knows a lot more about it than I do.
Okay, cool. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate
Yeah,
you. I
no
thank you for
problem.
being here today.
Absolutely. Any other questions?
Yes, I've been
Edward, do
dealing
you
with
have a
medical.
question?
Yes, ma'am. I have a medical debt from 11 years ago. I have been paying into the Attorney General's collection agency for probably 15 years of different medical debts. My husband got brain cancer and died. I've never, I've always had to pay. I mean, I think some things were forgiven, but these collection agencies act as though I have to keep paying them. And I was at a Dress for Success thing where a guy said, well, if you keep paying money, that it ends up keeping it alive. But I've always had to be responsible for debt, no matter how many years in the past. There's not been a statute of limitation mentioned to me ever.
So that's right. So the statute of limitations starts running from the date of default. So if you stopped paying altogether, the statute of limitations clock would start. When you continue to pay, then that clock never starts running. And
yeah,
so
but as a Christian, I feel like if I have that $20 a month to pay to these two agencies, I'll be really honest, I feel like, so you're saying I'd have to withhold paying and then the statute of limitations would kick in? I'm sorry, I have a little ADD.
Yep.
So
nope, that's okay. Yeah, basically it starts when you stop payment. And anytime you restart payment, so if you stopped for just a little while and restarted, that's going to stop the clock and it won't restart again until you stop paying. And so the thing that I would say, and I understand that a lot of people have very strong feelings about not paying their debt. It makes them feel like a bad person, or it makes them feel like they're violating tenets of their religion or things like that. But the thing I would say about it is paying your debt is not a moral thing. It doesn't make you a good person to pay your debt. It doesn't make you a bad person to pay a debt. What you need to do is focus on, you got to make sure that you can live, that you can pay for your living expenses, that you can get food in your mouth, because the company that you owe the debt to, they're going to be fine. Big companies, medical places, they're going to be fine if you don't pay that debt. You might not be, because you're not paying for your housing, or you're not paying for your food, or for your medications. And so just keep that in mind. Like, those companies don't care very much about you. You're just a cog in the wheel. They'll get money from somewhere else. They can get tax breaks for writing off bad debt. Don't feel bad for not paying, your MasterCard, or not paying OSU Hospital. They're not hurting. They'll be fine. You need to make sure that you are good, that you are getting the things that you need. Let's see. HCAP. So yeah, Francesca, HCAP, again, is not something that I'm super versed on, but it is a possibility for if you are getting medical services. They're supposed to tell you that you can apply to have some or all of that forgiven through the HCAP. And there's also sometimes charity care as well. But if you're paying the AG's office, that usually means that you owe a state agency. So one of the state hospitals, if it's medical debt. And for that, they also can offset your state tax refunds. So just keep an eye out for that.
Oh, they have.
Yes, may I jump in here? I don't know if that was with, like, if it's a state hospital like Ohio State or anything like that, you can usually talk with their billing office and ask them if they have any financial assistance programs or that you can apply for it, and they can apply that towards your back balances, that kind of thing. And they will go back to your income from those years and they can adjust that.
They
Yes,
never
They
ma'am.
can,
told me that. I was never
they
told that.
can backdate it. They can
Lord.
Yes,
backdate it, but I
ma'am.
do think that they're limited in the number of years that they'll go back. Again, I'm not the most
Okay.
familiar with HCAP, other than that it does exist and it is something that they're supposed to tell you. I think usually when I get medical bills that there's a form on the back of the bill to fill out for HCAP. So,
Yes.
you know, just keep an eye out on that, especially for future bills.
Yes, there's normally a form, and if you're getting unemployment or that, I would probably think you're below the poverty level, I would say, because you said you're a substitute teacher. Teachers are not making all that much money. They don't get paid well. But I mean, and if when your husband passed away, that put you in a financial bind. I know when my dad passed and my mother had to start learning how to be financially responsible, that put her in a real bind. So I
Yeah.
would say yes, if you can try to get hold of them and fill out those forms, and they will sometimes do them online with you or talk it out on the phone with you as well.
I'm on the charity program, but they never said anything about forgiving all the medical debt. Never. So I guess I have.
Well, and sometimes it won't be all of it. Sometimes they will at least write off some of it. It all depends on income levels, and I don't know those cutoffs off the top of my head.
Agreed. It does apply to your income level at the time you received at the time of service. And it could be, you could ask them, can they adjust it now based upon your current income level, and see if they're willing to do anything at all.
Thank
That's
you.
what I would suggest. I don't know.
Thank
And
you.
my friend gets it, and she makes 60,000 a year. So, and she's at OSU, and they take off 95%. And then my other friend makes like 40,000, and they take off 100%. So I would definitely just call and see what you can do. I'm not aware of them backdating, but I would definitely call anyway and see if you can, even if you can't backdate it, if you can get
Yeah.
future ones, then it's still helpful.
Thank you.
So, well, ladies, I appreciate this opportunity to spend some time with you today, answer your questions, and hopefully give you some information about sort of what's going on. I do have another meeting I have to get to at 2:30. But I did want to let you know that I really appreciated this opportunity. I really enjoyed the conversations we were able to have, and I thank you so much.
Sandra, we thank you for your time as well. This has been very good content shared with all the ladies. Again, I have Sandra's information and it's been dropped here in the chat. If you want to reach out to her outside of this meeting. Outside of that, I wish you all a beautiful weekend. I'm hoping you, excuse me, you can join us tomorrow for a PWG meeting. I'm sorry, I'm a little under the weather. And the sun is shining. So I hope you'll go get a kiss from the sun this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies, for joining us. Wishing you a safe and healthy weekend. Hoping to see you tomorrow or on Tuesday evening for our PWG meetings.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you, Sandra, so much. This has
Bye.
been amazing.
Thank you.